Hello and welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. This is a podcast to help you find peace with food and overcome disordered eating. And I'm Harriet Frew, aka the Eating Disorder Therapist. And I'm so excited to share with you all kinds of stories, tips, information and guest interviews to help you on your journey in finding peace with food. So thank you so much for listening today. Now today I have another guest on the show all the way from the Netherlands. I am talking to Queeny June Borgman, registered dietitian, personal trainer, writer and founder of IAMSTUFFED. Queeny was raised in Amsterdam, having an Indian mother and Dutch father, and being Jewish, Queeny thrives on bringing a diverse and eclectic approach to food and looking at the world. Queeny is not your regular dietitian and provides bespoke packages to people to improve their relationship with food and exercise, whilst also enhancing their mindset and relationship with food. And one of her special interests is working with eating disorders and also helping people regain their menstrual cycle. Queeny has not always had the easiest relationship with food herself. Previously, she tried almost every diet and wellness plan going and really has been on a journey in coming to be in a peaceful place in her body and mind. Queeny draws on her personal experience and professional expertise to help others do the same. I'm really looking forward to speaking to Queeny. Let's get to the interview. Hi, Queeny, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you so much that I could come on a podcast on such a short notice, but I'm so happy that we can talk again because you've been at my podcast. Now we're switching around.
Yeah, no, it's really great, actually. And I really enjoyed coming on your podcast. And I'm trying to think, how long ago was that now? Can you remember?
I think it was definitely last year, and maybe somewhere in October or November.
Yeah, so
somewhere
sure.
there. So it's almost half a year. Wow.
I know. Where does time go in this kind of crazy pandemic times?
Definitely.
So, Queeny, can you just introduce yourself, please, to the listeners?
Yeah, of course. Well, Queeny, I'm 25 years old and I am from the Netherlands. And currently I'm a dietitian, personal trainer and lifestyle coach. But if you would go back in time around 2012, 2013, I was kind of developing my eating disorder without knowing it, being very into fitness, what I think a lot of people are nowadays, but really taking it to a next level, being very firm and strict rules around food, clean eating, maybe a little bit of orthorexia as well. And at some point, it went well and I was just on a good quote unquote healthy weight, but there still was a lot of meddling with food. And somewhere around 2015, I really went bad and lost a lot of weight. And I also stopped with my education back then because I was actually basically living a lie with the fact that I wanted to do finance, but of course it wasn't the case because I wanted to become a dietitian. But because I have an Asian heritage, I was just telling myself, do what is, what makes mama proud. But I couldn't do that anymore because I hated it. I found it dreadful and my grades weren't that well either. Because of that, a little bit, I came into that, dark period of my life in 2015. And then my eating disorder was very bad. I hit a very low weight. I hit a very low body fat. And I knew that something wasn't good, but I was in denying phase until I got extreme hunger because that scared the living hell out of me. I got that for quite some time and I was so sick of it that I went to a dietitian and I actually said to her, I want to fix my period because there was something that was off for quite some time. And we started with that. But I think in the first consultation, she already knew that I had an eating disorder, but I was very much in denial. And we went working on the, menstruation, but actually it was also eating disorder recovery because I needed to eat the amount of calories that you have on a midi-mod method. And I did that for quite some time, so 3 or 4 months. But then I relapsed. And when I relapsed, I didn't listen to her anymore. And I started actually my uni to become a dietitian. So what I had was Queeny that was underweight and going to uni, what I actually loved because it was the course that I wanted to follow, the bachelor that I wanted to have. But I still had my problems with food and I lost quite some weight again. So that eventually developed in binging for quite some time, 3 years. And in those years, I really, of course, I had some contact with the dietitian, but I really needed to help myself and mostly help myself throughout that time to get rid of all those damaging habits, either drinking too much coffee, chewing gum, drinking too much fizzy drinks, or eating low calorie or eating low fat. And eventually I did it and I became a dietitian. I became everything what I said before. And nowadays I help people with disordered eating or eating disorders.
That's lovely. Thank you, Queenie, for sharing your story. So I'd love to just go back and pick up on some of those points that you talked about, actually. Mm-hmm. But can I go back even earlier? Because I understand as well you have an Indian mother, is that right? And a Dutch father. And your family are also Jewish, is that right?
Yes, so we have a lot of things going on, basically. And there's even a little bit German and Greek there, but we don't really do something with that. But the main things are being Indian and Dutch. And the Jewish part came a little bit later on, but they are all present.
So did you find as well, in terms of like, what was your relationship with food like from early on, kind of having the influences, I guess, of the different sort of cultures?
Well, yeah, it's very, actually, I like the Dutch food. It's very simple. It's very, veggies, meat, and some potatoes. And I really like that. And the Indian food, in the beginning, I didn't really find that a problem. But when I went into my eating disorder, of course, it was a problem. And my eating disorder actually triggered IBS. So what actually happened was I couldn't have Indian food because of the onion and spices, because my stomach would get upset. But it was, of course, for the eating disorder, something that was A-okay, because now I cannot have the fatty food as well. So, yeah, I do think that my eating disorder time didn't really like Indian food and really like the Dutch food, basically.
Sure. So for you said that your eating disorder was sort of triggered in around 2012. And was there something, what do you think, was there any particular sort of trigger or life kind of thing going on that set you off on that road?
Yes, most definitely. Because during my high school time, I did not have any problem with food at all. I would just eat anything, what I want, how I want it, when I want it, and how much I wanted it. But the moment that I went from high school to uni, it was a very, very big change. And actually my comfy life of just going to school, hanging out with friends and studying became much larger in responsibilities. It became traveling with the train to your destination, making sure that your schedule was right with your side job, with studying for school, having projects, getting into that student life. And it was just too much of a change so rapidly that it kind of triggered, for me personally, the disordered eating.
No, I mean, it is such a big transition, isn't it? Like, I think like going to uni, like it's really exciting and stimulating and can be like a wonderful time of your life, but also, yeah, like you're saying, in a way, it's a massive change, isn't it? Moving from perhaps the safety and routines and the things that you know.
Yeah. And the first time it was very dreading because it wasn't something that I live in Amsterdam and I needed to go a little bit further than Amsterdam in Haarlem. And now I also think that I'm just more adult the second time I went to uni and was a little bit more confident and know what I was getting into. And back then I didn't knew it at all. And of course I had, the bachelor that I didn't want of finance. So it just was layer on layer of, I think, discomfort.
Yeah, no, sure. And do you think before that, like when you were at high school, had you ever sort of struggled at all with like low self-esteem or any other sort of aspects of your mental health?
Well, that's a good one. I think I can get two things out of that. I matured a little bit more earlier, I think, than a lot of girls around me. So I got my menstruation and breast development around 11 or 10. And that is, of course, can be different. Some people get it earlier even, but I found that very invasive, very like one point I can just wear a t-shirt and now these things are growing. And that was something that really was like, I was dreading it. I really was. And I think secondly is maybe because of the almost rank order you have at high school. And it's something that I still hate till today, because I wasn't a person that was bullied, but I did like to have it a little bit more different, as in clothing wise and stuff like that. And I never felt free on doing that. So for me, that was something that also, if I look back, could be very triggering, because at the end of the day, I cannot be myself. Actually, how I could almost compare it to how maybe a person is gay in high school. They want to, tell the world, but they cannot, because they know they will be bullied because of it. And I think the same actually goes for me. I want to have different clothes. I have a different style. And I know if I would be myself, I would be bullied for that.
Sure. I mean, I think you brought up two really good points there, I think, that are often so relevant for people that struggle with eating disorders. And I think developing early, going through puberty early, that is really, really tough, isn't it? I think if you do go through it just even a year or something before your peers, you can feel incredibly self-conscious. And whereas when it's happening a bit later, when maybe it's happening to everyone around you, it's a bit easier to deal with. I mean, it's still not easy, is it? I think puberty is not a nice thing.
I can remember that I was like wearing like a warm sweater over a sweater when it was kind of becoming like either the end of summer or the beginning of, the end of spring or the beginning of summer. And people were just wearing t-shirts and they were like, Queeny, why the heck are you wearing, such a warm sweater and vest and everything? And that was just purely because of that. It was just for my liking. It was very early, but I also think I wouldn't like it if it was very late as well. So I think at the end of the day, it would have given me discomfort at any time.
Yeah, well, I think there's something, isn't there, just at that age about conforming, isn't there? Because I was kind of the opposite, where I had my period really late and didn't wear a bra till really late, and then I felt really self-conscious for those reasons as well. So it's such a pressure, isn't it? I think to want to fit in, not wanting to stand out at that age. You really want acceptance, don't you?
Well, if I would have my periods, for example, when I would be 15, I would find that, or breast development, I wouldn't be happy with that either, because in my head, there's this mental range of, oh, this would be a good age. And if it's that, quote, late, if I would say it that way, I would experienced discomfort with that as well. So basically for me, I know now there cannot influence when it is going to happen. But in my head, I had this range on, I would like to have it, that moment, and everybody actually has it. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah, no, sure. No, it's just such a tough age, isn't it? And I think linking to your second point as well, where you were just kind of perhaps very aware that there's a part of you that really wanted to express yourself and wear the clothes that you wanted to wear, etc. But you kind of sensed that if you did that, you wouldn't kind of get the approval maybe or acceptance of other people. So you had to sort of almost squash yourself a little bit, I suppose, didn't you? And you weren't able to be your full self.
Definitely. I've worn all those years, I've worn jeans, but I hate jeans. And nowadays, I think already I've used like a pair of jeans in 2020 because of Corona. But before that, I haven't worn jeans for like 7 years. But because for me, it was such a, reminder of that, basically those years. And I do often relate high school with prison because it is so similar. You have the good guys, the bad guys, the bullies. There's a certain rank in it. And for me, it is just, there's some similarities in that. I find it kind of funny when I look back, I had my end presentation on my school. I did it about Lady Gaga. And I know 1000% sure I did that because she opened that door for more creative clothing. And I'm very thankful for that because she made that threshold a lot lower.
Yeah, no, sure. So it kind of really gave you kind of permission in a way to sort of be yourself and to experiment and be creative and not be confined by other people's expectations.
Definitely.
Yeah. So like you were saying, so going to uni, like so many, so much change to deal with, I guess. It sounds like although perhaps parts of that were positive, it was also perhaps quite overwhelming at the time. And then is that the first time then you suddenly sort of became more conscious about what you were eating or wanting to change how you looked?
Well, there's a little time before that, and that is when you end high school. There's this end dance, I believe. I don't know if everybody has that, but here in the Netherlands, you do have that. So you all come together for this party at school, and everybody comes in dresses, a little bit like homecoming. And it was the first time for me that I actually was worrying about my legs because I would be wearing a dress. And that was the first time that I was kind of looking at my food and was like, okay, I'm not going to drink juice, but I'm going to drink like crystal clear or something. And that happened for like 1 or 2 weeks. Then it stopped. And then the second time around when I went to uni, I was like, I think it's like the first semester or something that was like 3 or 4 months in. I noticed that I was gaining weight because I had more freedom in my food, because normally your parents, make their lunch or you buy something, but not everything. You do not decide the whole meal, basically. So because of that freedom and changing my rhythm, I gained some weight in that first part of that year. And from there on, I was starting to change my food. And that would be like, normally I would like eat bread with something on it. And then I was like, okay, now I'm going to eat apples or something like that, or nuts. What basically looking back, I'm like, okay, you've just eaten a bag of nuts, but that is not like calorie wise better than bread. But that is something that you look back, of course, that is like, you learn.
No, sure. So it sounds like, to begin with, perhaps you had a bit more, you could be more relaxed with your eating, I guess, and you had more freedom, and then perhaps you found you gained a little bit of weight, and then you didn't like that, and then you say you started to make some sort of swaps, and then did that quite quickly sort of move into more of an unhealthy zone where it became a bit more compulsive or obsessive?
I think it took about a year. And the funny thing is that I went to that school with a good friend of mine. And I know sometimes when I speak with her, she refers to that time as in, do you remember the time that you were swapping food? And then 2 years later on, I saw you and you like almost died because you were so skinny. So she really is my like reference point on what I really did, because sometimes when you're very malnourished, you can get, how would you call that in English, that you do not remember stuff anymore. Amnesia, I believe.
Amnesia, or just a loss of memory. And
so I have little bits and parts because of the low weight that I cannot fully, bring back. And then she's very chill actually to talk with her, because she can bring that back for me so I can link it again. So it went worse when actually she went away from the study, because we did the first year together and the second year she wasn't there. So in the second year, I eventually went to classes less and less, and I only did the exams. And there, because of less contact with school, it went worse.
Okay. So it sounds like as well, it really kind of impacted your sort of studies and your social life and everything, did it? Because you became so sort of preoccupied.
Definitely. Well, the funny thing is, when it comes down to being social with my fellow students, they were just not my crowd. So I think even when it wouldn't have been an eating disorder, they were just still not my type of people. But I vividly remember that I'm always very outgoing, even with the eating disorder, when it was for drinks and foods or going to places. It wasn't a problem then often. So my eating disorder wouldn't be with those events, but at some point it did. And then I knew that it wasn't well at all, and it was going further and further.
Yeah, no, sure. So, and then in that time you contacted a dietitian, did you, for some support? Is that right?
Yes. On a very, I think, different way than most people would do. What I basically did is that I called the school where I eventually went to study. And I said to her, do you have students that maybe like need a subject or something like that? So I wanted help, but, I was like, okay, this is the core of the dietitian group, so maybe it is better to be there. But of course, students can't help somebody with a low weight because that's just dangerous. So she gave me 3 options, and it was a guy, other lady, and another lady. And the guy, I wasn't really comfortable with him for my eating disorder. I don't know, maybe it's just a female to female thing, but I wasn't really comfortable with that. The other lady I didn't really click with, looking at her page and what she did. And the last lady, she lived near, and I was like, okay, you look normal, so I'll give you a try.
Okay, sure. And at that time as well, did you, I guess as well, when you're seeing a dietitian, I mean, I appreciate the work you do now as a dietitian, you do a lot broader kind of work, don't you, in terms of working on mindset, relationship with food. It's not just about what you eat. But when you had support back then, were you able to kind of deal with a bit more of the kind of mindset and a bit of the psychological side of the eating disorder?
Well, I think, I knew that I had an eating disorder, but it went actually fired a little bit up when I went to her, because it triggered my eating disorder more, because she did things, of course, that triggered it, like giving a food schedule or eating X amount of calories. So I really noticed that those tendencies went up, and she told me, I'm going to help you, but hell no, that I'm only going to do that. So either you go to a psychologist or you go to a social worker, but these are like the things that I want you to do, one of those two, otherwise I won't help you. What I get, because it's a multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah, no, sure. So did you do that then at the time? Did you seek kind of other help alongside?
Well, I must say that I was very, very insulted when she said that I needed to see a shrink, basically. So I did not do that, but I did went to a social worker.
Sure. Okay. And what, because I guess it's a bit different maybe in the Netherlands to in the UK, but how does the social worker, like what kind of input do you get from a social worker in the Netherlands around eating disorder support?
Well, it really started out very differently, because I started with that social worker. That was just, I think, my very eating disorder part. Can you help me out with which study I need to choose? Because I knew that I needed a certain rhythm to, like, let's say this way, I am not like the eating disorder patient, and wouldn't be back then, or even now if I would have it, that I want to just sit at home and be stuck with my eating disorder. So I knew I wanted to go to school again. So that was something that I really discussed with her, what we're on, what I love, what I like to do. And I went to some open days of different unis. And somewhere in the middle, I started to open up what was actually on. And she was like a little bit, and I truly think that she wanted to help, but she wasn't qualified enough to do that. So, of course, she would ask some critical questions, but it wasn't near like a psychologist would do.
Yeah, no, sure. Sure. And it sounds as well that maybe at that stage, you were maybe, do you think, a bit ambivalent about change, almost like, I wonder if you were ready, do you think, then to recover?
Well, let's say it this way. I was always ready to recover if extreme hunger was around the corner. But if it wasn't there for quite some time, I was more, reluctant and more easy and like, okay, there's more space for the eating disorder. But then again, I am a person of principle. And when I have like a deal with somebody that I would do something, I would do it. So I know that the dietitian asked me, you're eating 3,000 calories now, why are you doing that? Because you didn't do that before. And I was like, we made a deal. So that's why I'm doing that. It isn't really a good motivation looking back, because it's external, but I really jumped in and out motivation, as in sometimes it was external, sometimes it was internal. And I really was in different stages of the motivational stages, basically.
Sure. No, I mean, so interesting. And I think so many people listening will really relate to that, because I think there is often a lot of changes in motivation, isn't there, in eating disorder recovery? That's really very, very normal.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think the most grateful that I was actually is that I knew that I wasn't living my quality of life. And because of that, I still was striving for recovery. It didn't matter how many times I binged, or even when I was underweight, I knew that this wasn't something for me. It didn't fit me and how I looked at life, basically. So that was eventually, and still till today, is motivation for me to do things different, to treat myself right, or, the self-care what comes along with it as well. Because if your quality of life is good, you're just not in a good mood, and you're making yourself more vulnerable to go into bad stuff, basically.
Yeah, no, sure. But it sounds like as well, I think, again, a really helpful thing, which people will relate to, but when you can actually sort of really acknowledge your values, I guess, and like it sounds like for you, when you had your eating disorder, there was a real disconnect in a way between you leading your kind of value-based life, and you weren't feeling good physically, mentally, so that, and you didn't like that. so that was kind of, that brought you kind of more and more towards wanting to change, I guess, because it sounds like you're quite, strong in your values, I guess, and you have quite a kind of clear vision of the life you do want to be leading.
Yes, I do not. And it's something that I think is very important as well. I did not want to let become that eating disorder my identity. So, of course, I have a problem and I take it very seriously. But I also just want that, normal life, what normal is. So I was really focused on that. And I know that I needed to let that eating disorder go to achieve that. And I think depending, on which crowd you hang out with, I had healthy people around me. So I had a friend that had a boyfriend, or a friend that went out for a partying and stuff like that. And that is often good confrontation on, what are you doing? Because you're sitting alone, maybe at home, over exercising and with your food and crying because you've just binged, but know why you're doing it, because you could also eventually, go to a party, have fun. Even actually, if you're in a stable situation with your eating disorder, you could do that as well. Don't just chill with your eating disorder.
Yeah, no, sure. There sounds like a couple of things there, like you really talked about, perhaps kind of the values and wanting to be more in line with those, but also perhaps being confronted or, challenged yourself when you're seeing your friends going out and doing fun, normal things, and you kind of thinking, oh, I don't want to miss out on that, or kind of, seeing that, you wanted to experience those things. Was there anything else as well that really helped you kind of really make that decision that you wanted to recover, or anything else that kind of helped you on that recovery journey?
That's a tough one. Yeah, I think it's a very multifactorial thing, as in, I really, that like those extreme hunger things that happened, those were like the kickoff for me to recover, because I really still till today find them very, very scary. Not because the amount of food that has been eaten, but you really see that primal part of your body taking over. And we are always, the proud people that think with their brains, and we have so many knowledge and we are smarter than other animals, but that part is still there. And I think we do not acknowledge it that much. So it was very confronting to have that. And other things that will maybe be triggering for me for recovery, because triggering isn't always a negative word, of course. I think also, again, to help people, because eventually I got that dietitian in front of me and I was like, that is a very, sick, cool job to have, to help people out, to change their way of thinking. And especially when it comes down to eating disorder patients, you really change somebody's life.
Yeah, no, sure. So it was almost having something, wasn't it, like a purpose or a vision that was greater than the eating disorder, and it really kind of pulled you forward. And, and it sounds like lots of things, really. And I think it's often the way. Go on. I
think maybe also adding that on, I'm always like very curious how things will, go and end. So if I would go with my eating disorder, I know how it's going to end. I either die, or I will be that sick person that either goes in and out of clinics and stuff like that. But when I am that person that is healthy, in, depending on what you see as health, but thriving and doing what she loves, I can see what it, I'm curious on what it will bring more. So if I would have chosen my eating disorder so many years ago, I wouldn't have this conversation with you. I would have become a dietitian at all. I wouldn't have become a personal trainer, lifestyle coach, wouldn't have IAMSTUFFED, wouldn't have met all the cool people that I've met, basically. So there is a far more cooler story that goes and goes, and that you basically write if you choose for living than choosing for a disease.
Yeah, no, it's really kind of powerful to hear you say that, really, because I think, like when you're sort of really reflecting on so many positives that have come from you taking that other road.
Definitely.
Yeah, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? So Queeny, can you talk a bit more about, like, obviously, like, you lost your menstrual cycle when you had your eating disorder, and now when you work in your work, you're kind of, that's one of the areas that you really sort of focus on, isn't it, in helping people to restore their menstrual cycle. So could you just talk a bit more kind of about that, like your own experience, and also the sort of advice you would give to people that are trying to restore their menstrual cycle?
Well, yes, maybe it's a good thing to start off, like, just like I found it very confronting to have breast, I found it very confronting to get my period. I got it when I was in India, and I was really like what the hell is that? And I don't want to go to school anymore. And, it's just crying. I wasn't a big fan of it. And when I started training too much and eating too less, it went away. And like the first 1 or 2 months, I was, kind of happy. And when the third month came around, I was kind of freaking out. And I knew that I needed to change lifestyle wise. And that change came far later on. But it taught me a lot about, how a woman's body is so different than a body of a man. And we always, say women and men are equal. No, they are different, but they should get equal rights. Because when it comes down to the biological system, it's just totally different. So what I mostly aim for when it comes down to period recovery, it are a few guidelines. It's eating enough, so the nutrition part, then also the composition of the nutrition, carbs, fats, and actually not a lot of protein. Then it's the movement part. Over exercising or a lot of cardio will basically, ruin your period. It is a very much of a fight or flight attack what you give to your body. So for example, if I go out running, I maybe think, 10 kilometers, I'm doing a good job. But translating that to your primal brain, it's maybe you running from a lion, and it just gives stress. So that is a part that I look at as well. Then it's the part of mindset. If you really want your period that bad, I almost can 1000% say that you will not get it. It will always come at a moment that you do not expect it. Then it's stress. If you have stress, it's going to be a hard thing. You really need to calm down. And I think a lot of people with the anxiety around food and movement, that part, if that calms down, there's more room for your period. And last thing is sleep. If you do not sleep well, just like they say for strength training, you need that for recovery. The same goes for your period. Bad sleep is bad signals, is overtired body, is no period or bad period.
Well, thank you. I think really helpful to just run through those points. And I think so interesting as well, I think we're so conditioned sometimes to think, aren't we, that, like more exercise, more cardio, whatever, that's a really positive thing. But like you're saying, in a way, it is a stressor for the body. And if you're doing it too much, particularly, your body probably does put your body, doesn't it, into kind of fight, flight and thinking that you're fleeing danger. And it can be a real stressor then.
Yes. And sometimes I'm maybe a little bit, in Dutch we say direct in the way we talk. I sometimes really need to hit home hard and say, if you go on with this in the future, you will not have children, because a lot of people bring it to a place that it becomes very hard to get children, or maybe with special treatment, because they're really breaking it down. They're really putting their body in, basically, some people almost like how the people in the Holocaust have, had their horrible conditions. And that is just very painful for the body. And the trust goes away as well, because it's almost like, how would you say it? If you would get a dog and you would hit the dog would trust you less. And actually what you're doing is the same with your body, not giving it enough food, not giving it enough water, not giving it enough rest, blah, 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 everything that comes with it. If you do that, you're disconnecting the trust that your body has in you.
Yeah, no, so true, isn't it? And, I think so much about kind of healing from an eating disorder is trying to sort of reconnect with your body again, isn't it? Reestablish that trust, listen to your body and, take care of it and give it what it needs.
Yes, but things like, it sounds crazy, but things like using baby oil and just touching your body again and stuff like that, because it's always, a lot of people maybe don't touch their body in a loving way, but more in pinching and look how much fat I have, stuff like that. And that does something, mentally. So starting out with showering or really connect with your body by touching it or giving it a healthy meal, it does a lot long term.
Yeah, no, it's trying to sort of get someone more in that kind of self-soothing place, isn't it? Where they're kind of, I think so many people with eating disorders are extremely good at caring for other people and are, really, really kind and very, very nurturing, but they really struggle to do that for themselves. And it's almost kind of being able to turn that nurturing inwards, isn't it? And to sort of give yourself that soothing and kindness that you really deserve.
Definitely. Although I sometimes see something else before look, I'm speaking Dutch. For example, when they're making food, you're making food and you're just making a beautiful plate with food and you're maybe like using potatoes, using oil, stuff like that. But you let somebody else eat it. And then it's actually you that wants to eat that, but you're not ready for that mentally. So you're just basically watching another person eat what you want to eat. And although that looks soothing, it can also be something distorted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think it's a very eating disorder thing, isn't it? That, when you're restricting your food, when you're sort of in a state of starvation, you kind of want to be around food and you want to feed everybody else, even when you're not allowing it yourself. And I guess that's a bit of a survival instinct, isn't it, almost?
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of, if you would like look at the statistics of what I eat in the days of food challenges, I think a high percentage of those people that are watching are people with eating disorder or disordered eating, or people that are dieting down, because it draws that way of thinking and going around food draws you to food even more.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? I think the number of people I think I've worked with that work in bakeries or in cafes or in supermarkets, they can be around food or like bake all the time. And not that, of course, there's nothing wrong with baking if you really love it and enjoy it. But if you're kind of doing it because of the eating disorder and you're not really eating anything yourself, then it's not so healthy.
Yes, and I've done exactly the same. I started out in a cafe with an eating disorder, and it was so complex because serving the food, okay, but eating there in the evening was something that I tried to avoid. So I always had like those short shifts that I could eat at home.
Yeah, for sure. So, Queenie, I wonder as well, like, do you think there's a big difference, if at all, between kind of the Netherlands and the UK with diet culture, how body image is experienced, or, do you think it's actually very, very similar?
I actually think it's very similar because of social media, because of the information. I think we almost practically get the same information or the new trends, the new diets, stuff like that. So nowadays, I think it's super similar. But if you would go back like 40 or 50 years, it wouldn't be similar at all.
Yeah, no, sure. And what in terms of, so today, obviously now you've recovered and you've trained as a dietitian, a personal trainer, and you kind of help people to kind of heal their relationship with food and have a good relationship with food, a good relationship with exercise. So can you say a bit more like kind of, what kind of work might you do if a client comes and works with you?
Well, I actually had that yesterday by coincidence. Well, first, I have that 20-minute option of just talking with each other, just to get to know each other, because I do not just take every client that comes in. Isn't financially very good for me, but mentally for me it is, because I need to like check out if we click, if this is going to be something, because otherwise we will both dread working together, and it's not something that I want, basically. Also, I do check on BMI, and I know that's not a good or chill thing to hear, especially when you have anorexia and seeking help. But when you do stuff like me online, I need to like eyeball throughout the screen how it's going. And basically it is too on the edge on having a very low BMI and doing stuff online. So that are some elements. And when we go about it, I standardly have an ebook on information about the eating disorders, but not per se as in how the DSM-5 is telling it, these are the criteria, stuff like that, but more on the mindset of what you're thinking and how to debunk that. Then I have a food schedule, and I will never ever put the amount of calories in that, of course. And there's no restriction like in the food schedule or in the list of forever. Oh my God, what a horrible word is that for me. But in the list of all the food options, there will not be, this is good, this is bad, because normally dietitians do that, but I cannot do that. And at least not with this specific group, because you're giving distort food thoughts even more place for that. So the list is very neutral. The food schedule is very neutral. Nothing is good, nothing is bad. Then we have the 60-minute consultation every month. Then if it's needed, there is this training schedule, but it really depends per person. And sometimes I do not give it, but I give it later on in the process if I see things are going better. And then there's the 7 days a week chat option. So next to the 60 minutes, I also rather have that somebody like apps me through WhatsApp on my phone. So They can either send pictures of their food or tell me what they've eaten or stuff like that. Because in the time that I had my eating disorder, that lady only had X amount of hours because of our insurance to help me out. So often I would send stuff, but she wouldn't reply. I get it, because if I could like go back, it took a lot of hours to like heal me. So I know that it wouldn't be profitable for her, but she did help me out so much in the time that she had. And even when I wasn't her client for a very long time, if I had like a big ass meltdown, she would say, okay, let's go and meet each other and see how and what. So what she did for me couldn't go completely, fully in the extent that I wanted to have. So that's why I'm doing it for the clients with an eating disorder. So they do have that option of having less anxiety.
No, sure. So just being able to offer a bit more of that intensive support if people want it.
Yes. Yeah.
Sure.
Because it's so needed. Like here in the Netherlands, you only have 3 hours with the dietitian, and a half hour of it is already for me to like make your food schedule. So it's only 2.5 hours throughout the year. It is crazy less.
I mean, it's nothing, is it? Really, it's nothing at all.
Nothing. Like
yeah, no, it's shocking, really, isn't it? It's just shocking to even think that that's gonna help someone recover, really. But
no, it's like a Harry Potter movie. It has the same duration. It's like crazy how that would work, but okay.
And obviously, like you're like a lifestyle coach as well, so it's like part of your work as well. Is there kind of like, are you kind of working with people on their self-esteem and their kind of emotions and their thinking, and I guess there's kind of deeper roots of the eating disorder?
Yeah, I always, ask why. And I think I push a lot of people out of their comfort zone, but I do that with the intention, because if you're in your comfort zone, then it means that you're with your eating disorder. And that's not something that I want to have. I really want to get you out of that eating disorder. So I always ask like critical questions on why does that happen, or why do you do that, and let them think. I had a lady last that she thought that people wouldn't like her or wouldn't care for her because she was too thin, or the people wouldn't see her anymore. And I asked her, did that really happen? Did the people didn't came, to your house because you were on a healthy weight? And then she said, no, I was just thinking that. It's a thought in my head, but it didn't happen. So these types of things, you really need to pull that out, because it is just a distorted thought. It isn't any truth in it.
Sure. No, that's really helpful, isn't it? Because I think it's so important. Obviously it's really valuable to be working on the food side, but also the kind of deeper roots and the thinking. And there's a lot of work, as we both know, that needs to be done there too.
But I must say, and I think I'll never say that, of course I'm a lifestyle coach, but when it comes down to deep psychology, you need a psychologist or somewhat in that field, because of course, I do my part. I learn a lot about, conditioning of the brain, but it isn't at the end of the day, my essence. So there's a lot of it, but I do believe that a psychologist has that support way, way, way better.
No, sure. So would you sometimes as well, would you sort of work alongside a psychologist as well if you felt someone needed that, or do you tend to perhaps work with people more that, I want to say kind of the milder end, but do you know what I mean? I don't like those words actually, but I suppose I'm just kind of wondering, I guess it's a spectrum, isn't it, about what different levels people suffer with their disordered eating.
Well, I'm stuffed. There are like I told you about the BMI, that's that rule, but it also is when you work with me, there should be another health practitioner alongside, because otherwise I will not do it. And the reason why is because ethically, as a dietitian, I would be failing, because I should really, specifically with eating disorders, if I do everything on my own, I could get sued. so it's not a good thing. Really not a good thing. And I think for everybody that's going to help, it would be the same as like chiropractor is going to give nutrition advice for somebody that he or she is helping, but it isn't his field. And maybe at some point the person has high cholesterol and he said, go and eat coconut fat, and that person dies, he's in big trouble.
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah, no, sure. No, it's important, isn't it, to have, different people involved who can kind of, offer their speciality.
Yeah, and also of the part, healing from an eating disorder is learning new perspectives, is putting your perspective aside you and seeking for new ones, because those different perspectives can give you recovery. And if at some point, you can talk with me, but you almost wringed everything out of me and you've got a certain amount of recovery, but you will never have that fully potential. So you really need to talk to a lot of people to give you that insight. For example, my sis always said me, told me that if you've broken your body down in like 2 years, so maybe will take the double amount of time to heal it. And although she didn't know anything about eating disorders, she did give me that insight on, Queeny, you need to be patient for recovery and stuff will work out, but it takes some time. And that is what I mean with perspective, because my dietitian never told me that.
Yeah, no, it's so true, isn't it? Because I think as well, it can be quite a frustrating experience for people, and really unsettling if they go into recovery with the expectation that everything's going to be better in like a couple of months.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of pressure on us as healthcare providers or people that have waited a long time to go into a clinic, and then it's almost like a Disney thing that you go in and you will go out there without an eating disorder. It's just not the case. Yeah. It happens maybe a little bit, but I think the majority of the group still deals with stuff, but it is more manageable, or they're more structured in their eating. So there should be a little adjustment in their reality, because it is hard work to get an eating disorder, but it's also hard work to get away from one.
Yeah, no, I think it's really true, isn't it? But also wanted to say to people as well, like, just be really hopeful that it is still possible. It's absolutely possible to recover, isn't
Definitely.
it? Just having those expectations and not expecting that it's going to be like a 4-week plan or something and out you sail into the sunset. So Queeny, where can people find you if they want to know more about you?
They can find me at IAMSTUFFED.nl, or they can find me on the podcast on Spotify and Anchor and almost everywhere, Apple Podcasts, I believe as well. And that is I'mStuffed_podcast. Or on Instagram, and that is at I'mStuffed_COM.
Okay, lovely. Okay. Well, Queeny, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and for sharing your story and all your insights. It's been really valuable.
Yes, I really enjoyed going back to memory lane, because when I look back at it all, I'm like, really, Queeny, but I also get that little girl from back then as well. So yeah, I look at it as a more structured thing than I looked at it before.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad that you've recovered too, and that you're doing the work that you do, and that you're wearing the clothes that you always wanted to wear and being yourself.
Yes. It's a thing that really stuck with me. All my employers said to me, Queeny, wherever you will go, you should be at a place where you can wear what you want to wear. Otherwise, it's not a place for you.
Yeah, very good advice. Okay, thanks, Queeny. Bye-bye.
So I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did. And do go and check out all of Queeny's info in the show notes. If you're not following me already, do seek me out on Instagram at the Eating Disorder Therapist. And for further support with your relationship with food, do visit my website at theeatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. I would be really grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you could rate and review it, as it really helps it to reach many more people. And if you'd like to get extra goodies from me and support this podcast, do sign up to my Patreon, and there's more information about that if you click on the link in the show notes, and it will take you right there. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.